Have you ever been hurt so deeply that you couldn't find the words to say anything at all? They don't argue. They don't seek revenge. They don't even explain how they feel. Instead, they simply become quiet. Most people assume this means they don't care anymore, but psychology tells a completely different story. Sometimes, the loudest pain is completely silent, and the people who say the least may actually be feeling the most. Today, we're going to explore the fascinating psychology behind people who go quiet when they're emotionally hurt. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why silence isn't always weakness. In many cases, it's the mind's final attempt to protect itself. Imagine someone who normally laughs with friends. They reply to every message. They share their thoughts openly. Then one day, something changes. They answer with one-word texts. They stop explaining themselves. They spend more time alone. Nothing dramatic happened on the outside, but internally, everything changed. Going quiet isn't simply being shy. It isn't necessarily depression, and it certainly doesn't always mean someone is angry. Psychologists describe this behavior as emotional withdrawal, a coping strategy where a person reduces communication to avoid additional emotional pain. Some people cry, some people argue, others disappear into silence. And surprisingly, this reaction is much more common than most people realize. The biggest misconception is that silent people are emotionally cold. In reality, many are emotionally overwhelmed. When emotional pain becomes too intense, the brain begins searching for the safest possible response. For some people, that response is silence. Why? Because they've learned that expressing emotions wasn't safe. Maybe they grew up hearing, "Stop crying, you're too sensitive. Don't make such a big deal out of it." Over time, the brain develops an unconscious belief, showing pain leads to rejection. So instead of expressing hurt, they hide it. Psychologists call this emotional suppression. Rather than processing feelings externally, they push them inward. It's not because they don't have emotions. It's because they've learned that emotions can become dangerous. Childhood experiences play a huge role. Children raised around criticism, emotional neglect, unpredictable parents, or constant conflict often become adults who instinctively stay quiet whenever they're hurt, because silence once protected them. So what actually happens inside the brain? Let's simplify it. When someone experiences emotional pain, whether it's rejection, betrayal, criticism, or abandonment, the brain reacts almost as if it has been physically injured. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, immediately detects a threat. It doesn't care whether the threat is physical or emotional. Pain is pain. Once activated, stress hormones like cortisol begin increasing. Heart rate changes. Muscles tighten. The nervous system prepares for survival. Now here's where it gets interesting. Some people respond with fight, some with flight, some freeze. But many emotionally quiet people experience something psychologists call the shutdown response. Instead of attacking or escaping, the brain conserves energy. Speech decreases. Facial expressions become limited. Thinking becomes slower. It's almost like the brain whispers, "If talking might make this worse, say nothing." Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking, has a harder time organizing emotions into words. This explains why someone might honestly say, "I don't know how I feel," not because they're lying, but because their brain temporarily can't translate emotion into language. Psychological research has consistently shown that social rejection activates many of the same brain regions involved in physical pain. In other words, being emotionally hurt isn't just in your head. Your brain literally treats rejection like an injury. Researchers have also found that people with avoidant coping styles often withdraw after emotional conflict. From the outside, this can look like indifference, but internally, they're often replaying every conversation, every word, every expression. Studies on attachment styles suggest that individuals with avoidant or fearful attachment frequently suppress emotional expression, not because they feel less, but because vulnerability feels unsafe. In other words, silence isn't always emotional emptiness. Sometimes it's emotional overload. Imagine two friends. Both experience betrayal. The first immediately confronts the person. They cry. They argue. They express everything they're feeling. The second simply says, "It's fine." Then they slowly disappear. No more phone calls. No more messages. No explanations. Months later, people assume they've moved on. But internally, they're replaying the betrayal almost every day, every memory, every conversation, every warning sign they ignored, because silence doesn't erase pain. Sometimes, it gives pain more room to echo. This is why emotionally quiet people often appear calm while carrying emotional storms that nobody else can see. Here's where misunderstanding begins. Most people judge emotions by volume. If someone cries, they're hurt. If someone screams, they're angry. If someone says nothing, they must not care. But psychology shows something different. Emotional intensity isn't measured by how loud someone becomes. Sometimes it's measured by how much they stop saying. Silence is often mistaken for strength. Other times it's mistaken for weakness. In reality, it can be neither. It can simply be survival. People who go quiet are often trying to prevent themselves from saying something they'll regret, or they're protecting themselves from further disappointment. Sometimes they've reached a point where explaining themselves feels more exhausting than staying silent. And after enough emotional invalidation, silence begins feeling safer than honesty. While silence may protect someone temporarily, long-term emotional suppression comes with costs. Unexpressed emotions rarely disappear. Instead, they accumulate. Stress remains in the body longer. Anxiety increases. Relationships become more distant. Communication breaks down. Loved ones begin guessing instead of understanding. Over time, people may believe, "No one understands me," but they also stop giving others the opportunity to understand them. This creates loneliness, not because nobody cares, but because nobody can respond to emotions they never see. Psychologists also warn that chronic emotional suppression has been linked with increased stress, emotional exhaustion, and reduced relationship satisfaction. Eventually, the person who always stays quiet may start feeling invisible, not because others ignored them, but because they slowly disappeared emotionally. Fortunately, silence doesn't have to become your identity. Here are 5 practical ways to break the cycle. Step 1. Name the emotion. Instead of saying, "I'm fine," ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling? Hurt? Embarrassed? Rejected? Disappointed? Giving emotions names reduces their intensity. Step 2. Pause before withdrawing. Silence often happens automatically. The next time you're hurt, pause for 30 seconds. Notice the urge to disappear. Simply recognizing the pattern gives you more control over it. Step 3. Express small truths. You don't have to reveal everything. Start simple. Say, "That comment hurt me," or "I need some time to think." Small honesty builds emotional confidence. Step 4. Choose safe people. Not everyone deserves your vulnerability. Psychological safety matters. Find people who listen without immediately judging or dismissing your feelings. Healthy relationships teach your brain that openness isn't dangerous. Step 5. Write before speaking. Many emotionally quiet people struggle to organize thoughts in real time. Writing gives the brain space to process emotions before expressing them. Sometimes the conversation becomes much easier afterward. Here's the most important lesson. The goal isn't to become louder. The goal isn't to force yourself to talk all the time. The goal is to stop believing that silence is your only form of protection. Healthy people aren't those who never feel hurt. They're the ones who know how to process pain without hiding from it. Real emotional strength isn't pretending nothing affects you. It's having the courage to let the right people see the truth. Because vulnerability isn't weakness. It's evidence that your nervous system no longer believes connection is dangerous. The strongest people aren't always the quietest. They're the ones who know when silence heals, and when honesty heals even more. Here's a simple challenge. For the next 7 days, notice every moment you become unusually quiet. Don't judge yourself. Instead, ask, what emotion am I trying to protect? Write down the answer. You might discover that your silence has been speaking for you all along. And once you understand what your silence is trying to say, you no longer have to let it control you. Your reactions aren't random. Your emotions aren't random. Even your silence isn't random. Your brain has spent years learning how to protect you. Sometimes those strategies helped you survive difficult experiences. But surviving isn't always the same as living. Understanding your own psychology gives you something incredibly valuable. Choice. The choice to respond instead of simply react. The choice to connect instead of withdraw. And the choice to let healing replace hiding. So, have you ever gone completely quiet after being hurt? Or do you know someone who does? Share your experience in the comments below. Someone reading your story might finally realize they're not alone. And if you enjoyed this video and want to understand the hidden psychology behind everyday life, you know what to do. Because there's always more to discover.